Hello again. It's Brian King with another edition of Succeed with ADHD Anyway. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm also an adult with ADHD and dyslexia. I also happen to be a very proud father. My boys have different forms of autism, and the younger two have ADHD as well. So I live and breathe the challenges as well as the resources and the solutions. So let's dig in and see what we can accomplish together. One of your fellow listeners asked if I could write or talk about this quite common challenge that many people with ADHD or autism spectrum challenges have. This is what he wrote. I read a lot about people like me who have difficulty controlling their anger. However, I have real trouble dealing with conflict and other people's anger. I get so flustered and emotionally confused that I don't know when someone is crossing my boundaries or not. So I just shut down and withdraw. I don't know how to even handle conflicts with those closest to me. Does this sound familiar at all? Well, right off the bat, I want to give you a resource. I happen to write a book that really dives deep into this topic and this conversation. The title of that book is Strategies for Building Successful Relationships with People on the Autism Spectrum. The subtitle is Let's Relate. And what you'll find is that the strategies in this book really generalize well to all relationships. So go ahead and pick that up and hopefully it'll help. But here's more. The issue that this listener or writer is really addressing here is the issue of emotional intensity. When you think of the intensity of light, sound, or touch being overwhelming and difficult to manage for many of us, the intensity of emotion is often more difficult to manage. The reason is because things like light, sound, or touch come from one direction. They come from outside of us. They come from the outside in. And there are things that we can do to block it out. Avoid people getting too close to us, wearing noise-canceling headphones, sunglasses, things like that. But when it comes to emotion from somebody else triggers emotions inside of us as well. So now we need to not only regulate the emotions that are coming in from the other person, we also have to regulate our own emotions. You might as well be playing both sides of a tennis match. And trying to keep the paddles alive, that's too much multitasking. If either emotion, such as fear or anger or sadness, comes at us really fast and with a high level of intensity, it typically happens so fast and so intensely that we can't regulate it. That's why you see such extreme displays of emotion from many of us. Sometimes it's called an anxiety attack or hysterics or a full-fledged meltdown. You can think of it like a pipe bursting. And then under those circumstances, we have to scramble to contain it or get the energy out somehow so that we can begin to calm ourselves down. Many of us will run from the situation entirely because we have to escape from that other person's emotion so that we can have the time and the space to regulate our own emotion. Make sense? Some clients I work with have come to realize that they avoid both showing and being around others who are emotional because emotions are particularly difficult for them to regulate. So what happens? Other people say that they're cold, they're distant, uncaring, lacking empathy, when the truth is they fear the dysregulating power of emotions, so they do their best to avoid them. Recently, I was speaking to a group of parents who had a common experience in that whenever one of them became upset, their child with either ADHD or autism spectrum challenges would quickly run up to them and say, I'm sorry, even if their child didn't do anything. I explained the following to them, and hopefully this will be helpful for you too. Their child does this in the hope that an apology will prevent you from becoming angry. Anger is one of the hardest emotions for us to regulate. And when we see it coming, we want to stop it. And many kids have learned that if you apologize to make the other person feel better, they won't become angry and you won't become upset and you won't have to go through the challenge to regulate that intensity. Understand? I've also heard from a few teachers that when they yell in class to get everyone's attention, a student on the spectrum, or with ADHD of course, will try to run out of the room or become real anxious in some way. Sometimes they'll burst into tears, or sometimes they'll just completely shut down. And this is because yelling happens suddenly, fast, and with more intensity than the student can typically handle. We had a similar situation a few years ago when my middle son was in 3rd grade, I believe. His teacher yelled a lot. And although he wouldn't run out of the room, he'd basically shut down and be disorganized for the rest of the day. Because in his mind, if she yelled once, it was just a matter of time until she yelled again. And the mistake that this teacher made when she saw him become upset is she'd go over to him and say that she wasn't yelling at him, and wasn't it unfortunate that the behavior of other students required her to yell? Well, here's what she missed. Even though she wasn't yelling at him, he was in the presence of that emotional intensity. Though the effect it had on the other students was to get their attention, for him, it rattled him so much that it was difficult for him to get organized again. So here was the solution I proposed, and it worked beautifully. When she knew she was going to yell, she'd walk over to him and place her hand on his shoulder, which cued him that a yell was coming. He'd then cover his ears, and when she was done, she'd take her hand off his shoulder, and he would take his hands off his ears. This completely removed the surprise element of the yelling, as well as allowing him a way to buffer the intensity of her yells. Now for adults, your solution begins with understanding that the issue lies in regulating emotional intensity. I've worked with clients for years who've had to negotiate the allowing or the permission to email or use texting with the person who's upset so that they can focus on the words without being in the presence of the emotional intensity until things calm down sufficiently that they can meet face to face and have a conversation calmly. Still, others have to agree to take frequent breaks during a discussion if they're face to face, if emotions begin to run high, because you know that when that happens, the other person can shut down on you when you really want them to remain open. We do what we must in our relationships to keep our communication open, honest, fluid, and prevent our emotions from running high. That way, our nervous systems won't become overloaded, and we have a better chance of remaining connected. Now, of course, there's a lot more to this, but hopefully I've given you enough to give you a good place to start. And I hope that this episode has been helpful, and if it has, please share it with other people. Don't forget to visit my website, which is succeedwithadhdanyway.com. There are a whole lot of other podcasts there, and I would be very grateful if you left a review to let me know how I'm doing, and if there's anything else I can do for you. And if you are so compelled, please visit iTunes as well, where you'll find the audio portion of this podcast, and leave a review there. That'd be really helpful. And most of all, please be sure to join me next time as I bring you another episode of Succeed with ADHD Anyway. In the meantime, here's Brian King saying, thanks for being you.